We are here at, must I look?
Yeah, just look straight into the lens, bro.
We are here at MNU head office, Department of Alien Affairs.
Have you recently had a close encounter?
Une rencontre plutôt inhabituelle.
A close encounter with something very unusual. Who are you people?
My name is Wikus van der Merwe.
I'm George.
I'm Devyn.
And this is the 12th episode of your Medicinema.
Today, we're going to talk about two sci-fi films surrounding extraterrestrials visiting the Earth. Close Encounters of the Third Kind and District 9.
Before we go there, however, we have quite a bit of news to tell you guys about. The annual Cinemacon happened in Vegas, where all the studios showcase investors what they have lined up for the year. And if you ever wondered why we get so many trailers for upcoming blockbusters around this time of year, now you know.
So at Cinemacon, we got to see two scenes from Alien Romulus, which I am pretty excited about.
Mm-hmm.
I was really disappointed with where Alien has gone since Ridley Scott has taken the helm back. And hopefully this will redirect it to a place that is a little more fan-friendly.
It's the same director that did Evil Dead Rise, right? Or the Evil Dead remake? Like the 2013 one?
Oh, that'd be great, because that was a fantastic movie.
I think it is.
I'm all about that. And then, we saw actually a couple horror things this year there. We saw that, and we saw the new M. Night Shyamalan trailer for Trap, which I actually have not watched, because M. Night Shyamalan movies, I think, are best seen blind.
I just checked. Yeah, it's Fede Alvarez. He made the Evil Dead 2013 movie, and yeah, he's doing the Alien remake now.
That's
Or
fantastic.
spin-off or whatever.
That's fantastic. And then we also have another Quiet Place movie coming out that they showed off there, which I'm pretty excited about. I don't know if you ever watched the Quiet Place films.
I have seen the first one. I'm not sure if I've seen the second one.
Yeah, I like them. I like them a lot. The big one, I think, for horror, probably for a lot of people, not so much me, but is the Nosferatu, I think, has its trailer there, right?
Yeah, and that's definitely the big one for me. Robert Eggers' new movie, which already after that trailer showcase apparently got pushed back the release towards award season. It was meant as like a summer blockbuster type thing, but apparently critics were were basically going wild over what they've seen there that they already pushed it towards award season, and they're gonna make a push for Academy Awards and all of that instead of the big blockbuster strategy.
The last thing I think they showed off really that was kind of note is that on a more sour note is that they showed a trailer for a remake of Speak No Evil, which just came out like I think a year or two ago.
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah.
Doesn't really feel like that needs a remake already, or probably really at all. But that's kind of things I was really excited about. I guess aside from some of the animation stuff that's coming, like the new Lion King movie. I don't know why we need that, but I'm going to try to watch it. Why not?
Yeah, I could live without the Disney remakes. The one big remaining news, however, is the Gladiator 2 showcase Paramount did. Apparently they showed 9 minutes of uncut footage to investors and critics and whoever was there at the time. People were excited about this. Like, it apparently looked really well shot and grand and big choreographies behind all of the action. The one big thing, however, to really talk about here, I feel like, is that this is apparently a kind of make it or break it moment for Paramount as a studio as a whole. They spent $300 million on this movie. They already had quite some hard years in the last years. And yeah, to recoup the budget of a $300 million movie, you don't need 300 million at the box office. You need more like 800 to 900 million at the box office, which is way more than Gladiator 1 originally made. So that's gonna be interesting. They really need a big success there, because the problem with those budgeting with those numbers are that they only get around 50% of the earnings at the cinema. Obviously, the chain takes some of it. They need to recoup their money as well. And additionally, those 300 million don't include any marketing budgets yet, which usually is at least like 50% of their own budget. So you can expect another 150 million going into that. So yeah, that's how we get to those insane numbers this movie needs to make. And if they don't, there are talks of other studios eyeing towards Paramount's direction and buying it out. So maybe after losing Fox to Disney, this might be another one of those happening soon.
Yeah, that's a huge gamble that I'm not gonna lie, man. I just don't see that paying off for them.
Yeah, I'm kind of.
I don't know anybody under the age of 52 who's like, yeah, Gladiator's coming back. You know, like I don't know anybody
Yep.
like that. There's got to be some kind of hook. Like Russell Crowe's not going to be in this as a major character, right? It's got to be somebody new. So it's got to be some. I mean,
it's Paul Mescal actually, who we talked about in All of Us Strangers, and who is the guy of Aftersun, the Irish actor.
okay.
He's playing the main apparently.
Nah, I think the only way this would have like recouped it is if like Taylor Swift was the main gladiator somehow or something. Like you really get the eyes on this film. No, yeah, I just don't see it. That's what a crazy fucking gamble. You know,
Yep.
this is a sign that's been indicative in movies and gaming and a lot of just the entertainment industries lately is that you have these what feels like these executives who rose to their points where they used to watch movies. They used to be really involved in films and love films and watch movies and stuff. The Gladiator 2 would have fucking been awesome 50 to 20 years ago or something, right? But these people are in these positions now where where they don't really watch movies or they're out of touch with what movies are, it feels like. And they're bankrolling on these bizarre fucking choices.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if that is the end of Paramount. But for now, we also have another topic of big news that also happened. It's insane how all of these things come together. But next to the big blockbuster news, we also got the big announcement of art house news, basically. Cannes announced all of their lineup and the jury for the upcoming festival.
What is that? Wait, what is that? What do you mean jury?
You know, in the actual jurors judging the competitions are in Cannes are usually also well-known names.
I see. Okay, I see this now. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there's two major competitions in Cannes. The side competition with more directorial debuts and indie movies, and the main competition for the Palme d'Or. In the side competition, the leading judge will be Xavier Dolan, which I love. He's the Canadian director behind movies like Mummy or Lawrence Anyways. And in the main competition for the Palme d'Or, the leading judge is gonna be Greta Gerwig. Looking forward to that. Coming to the actual movies that are gonna release at Cannes, it's absolutely stacked in my opinion. The most interesting things happening outside of the main competition to me is the George Miller's world premiere of Furiosa. So we have some blockbuster sides to Cannes as well.
Yeah, that's gonna be really good.
Yeah, looking forward to if it can stack up to the Mad Max Fury Road movie. And in the competition, we have an absolute stacked field, including some smaller names like Ali Abbasi, who I know for the 2018 fantasy film Border, that was great. His new film is the Trump biopic The Apprentice, which is fascinating. We have indie darlings like Sean Baker, where I loved the last film Red Rocket, but is also known for stuff like the Florida Project. Going further down the list, we have Oh Canada by writer-director Paul Schrader, famous for writing Taxi Driver and Raging Bull for Scorsese, but also director in his own regard for beautiful films like Mishima, which we talked about briefly in the first episode. David Cronenberg is back with another horror film called The Shouts. Yorgos Lanthimos is already back after Poor Things and teaming up with Emma Stone again.
We already have some like clips and commercials of that one playing. I haven't seen any advertisement for almost any of these other films, but that's the one I've seen advertisements for already.
I've only seen the poster, which already looks awesome. And for me, probably the most exciting film on the list might be the already infamous passion project of Francis Ford Coppola, Megalopolis, the post-apocalyptic self-funded mega blockbuster he envisioned for like 20 years is finally here. A true Apocalypse Now situation all over again. So maybe, just maybe we get another miracle and get a quality film like Apocalypse Now out of it as well now. But we'll see. That's my highlights of what's up and coming at Cannes.
Yeah. I had to look up some of these ones because I wasn't familiar with a lot of the stuff that was coming out here. I knew, Sean Baker, as you said, Yorgos Lanthimos, the Megapolis one. It looks really good. I'm excited for David Cronenberg's new one. The Substance is another one that looks really interesting by Coralie Fargate. It's a body horror film coming out by the person who did Revenge, and that was pretty fun. So that should be pretty good. In the I think it's the midnight screening competition or whatever it is. Whatever, I don't know how Cannes works.
I think it's just midnight screenings. I don't know if there's a competition.
I'm Cannes literate. There is a film coming out called Twilight of the Warriors Walled In, and that is based on a manhwa, which is like a Chinese manga essentially, about the walled city. I think it's Kowloon City that used to exist, but it was like a giant mega city that was destroyed by the Chinese government because it was just so compact and unsafe to be in. It was crazy. That should be really cool, kind of like sci-fi action movie out of China that we don't get enough of those, I think. So there's a couple things there that I'm excited about. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, never fails to have a spectacular lineup.
To mention, it opens with a Quentin. Sorry, I'm not by Mike.
Quentin Dupieux.
Yeah, it opens with a Quentin Dupieux movie, the second act, which I don't know anything about, but I know that dude makes some weird fucking movies.
For sure.
And I'm about that. I'm about that stuff. So I'm ready.
Mm-hmm. From worldly news, we're gonna switch gears now to outer-worldly movies, starting with Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind is the 1997 release Steven Spielberg blockbuster that takes somewhat of a slow approach to the first contact. We follow around Roy, an everyman that is, after a close encounter with a UFO, starting to see visions of a mountain. Throughout the story, we see him grow more and more fixated on the mountain that turns out to be the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. He and others impacted in the same way go on a journey to the Devil's Tower, where after sneaking into a secret military base, they get to witness first contact with the aliens. How did you feel about this? This is your first time seeing this, correct?
Yeah, I've never seen Close Encounters before. I've seen quite a few, obviously, of Spielberg's movies, but this one always slipped through my fingertips. And man, I am in love. My God, this movie. What an amazing film. I'm truly astonished by what this is. I think it's very out there for what Spielberg usually does or did even. It's not what I would have expected him to do, and I am fully on board with this kind of Steven Spielberg. My God, this is definitely my favorite Spielberg now. I straight up amazing movie.
That's super interesting to me. I mean, I guess he'd done a couple movies. He'd done Sugarland Express. He'd done Savage.
Jaws was just before this.
Yeah, Jaws was the one that came right before this. But, I mean, he went from, he did Raiders, but then E.T., Twilight Zone, the movie. I know you've never probably seen it, but he did a television series called Amazing Stories that were like hour-long episodes. And
I didn't know.
they're fairly science fiction-y, fantastical. Hook, Jurassic Park, AI. I don't know. This feels definitely, for me, this is core wheelhouse of Steven Spielberg. This is what Steven Spielberg does best. You're not wrong at all. Like this is pretty peak for him. But this is what he does best, I think, is this idea of taking science fiction and not making it like coming from somebody who's like a huge Star Trek fan, right?
Hmm.
Not making it super fucking nerdy, making it fun, making it enjoyable. It's a family friendly adventure that literally anybody of any age could watch and get super engaged in. It is an engaging movie.
To all of those points, I will completely agree. Like on paper, it's another sci-fi movie. It's a big blockbuster. It's meant for a wide audience. All of that sounds very much like a classical Spielberg movie. To me, there is so much more in this one particular that I wouldn't have expected. Like, yes, it's an everyday man story. I can see myself in this kind of thing, but the way they approach this, particularly more towards the end, like he looks at this alien encounter almost like a spiritual enlightenment situation for humanity.
Yeah.
And that's I would have never expected such an audio-visual, psychedelic almost version or interpretation of a first encounter. And that's really what struck me with this one, where I kind of couldn't believe that someone like Spielberg would use that kind of approach. If you directly compare it to something like E.T. E.T. is the most kids-friendly and basic, we're going on an adventure and having fun and for all of the family and doing little bit of tear-jerking here and there. I'm not saying that that's bad per se, but it's a pretty straightforward Hollywood kind of story. This really isn't to me. Like, it might seem like it on the surface, but there's so much more.
I will say that like the idea and the approach of like using the aliens using music in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not Spielberg. That's like of the times, Carl Sagan. That was like a conversation about extraterrestrial life, was communication using music. This is around the time that this is 77, right? So
Yeah.
this is just 10 years or so, I think, after the Golden Record. Do you know about the Golden Record?
No.
The
Oh,
Golden
wait, is
Record.
it the disc we sent to space?
Exactly.
Yeah, I
So,
see.
this conversation had been being had between the living science. I mean, Hawking was still, doing a lot of active stuff with this.
Mhm.
SETI was the search for extraterrestrial life. It's the big, giant dishes that turn all at the same time that you see in movies whenever they're like trying to contact aliens, right? That was
Yeah.
SETI. They closed it down a few years ago or whatever, but that was like at its height. So like that's kind of like just of the era, which is cool, but the attention of detail that he pays to that sound, right, and makes it a
Mhm.
center stage, which is something I want to talk about with this movie, is how brilliant his use of sound is in this film, either whether it's the sound effect itself being a brilliant, beautiful, clean tones that are just attractive and they garner the feeling of the story, or the fact that he uses silence really well in this movie.
Yeah.
But I think that attention to detail with sound itself is still prevalent in movies like Jurassic Park, where he was like hands-on with every dinosaur's roar. He wanted to make
Mhm.
sure they sounded exactly the way he wanted them to sound. It's not as a big a movie, but War of the Worlds, when the tripods boom and shit, and the sounds of the lasers, and like, oh my God, those sound effects are fantastic for like classic sci-fi stuff, right? So I think that the seeds are the best here, right? But I think that those seeds you can see planted in other films along the way too, or after.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. You have sprinkles of this throughout his entire career.
Yeah.
I just seeing it all come together here it was fantastic.
It's interesting that you saw it so late because, I saw this movie really young.
Mhm.
I hate using that word because I know that you know what it actually means and it doesn't mean that. But in the zeitgeist of my life, it's been a big part of it because there's a American cartoon I grew up with called Rocko's Modern Life, and they have a whole episode where a turtle desires to go back to his home island and like go mate and start the mating process or whatever. It's kid friendly. But the way he desires it is he's like carving the mountain out of mashed potatoes that he's supposed to go to, and like they literally mimic everything that the guy goes through. Um, and like that's not the only cartoon or TV show I saw growing up that like made like parodied this movie. So like this has been like a part of my life for a long time. So it's interesting for you to have seen it so late.
hmm I think it's a good point to actually get into the plot and go a bit
Yes.
point by point. In the beginning, since we already talked a bit about how this connects to other Spielberg work, I think you can really feel the Jaws experience here in the beginning, where for a long stretch of time we don't get to see any spaceship, even the lights in the skies. Takes a while before we get there. It's this great sense of mystery and tension being built without ever showcasing something. First, we see scientists gather in a sandstorm, no context, just like general nervousness. They find planes, but they shouldn't exist. Obscured through the flight controllers, we see kind of the view of coordinates of mysterious interaction with unknowing flying objects. Next, we see the perspective of an innocent child reacting to things happening just barely out of screen, using like the open fridge and the animal trapdoor. It's a great way how he, with just small interactions without actually showing the thing, builds up this expectation and this wonder.
The movie starts really strong in that desert scene in the archaeology dig, right? This was the first movie I think I saw with crosstalk. So many movies don't have characters talk over each other. One person delivers dialogue,
Okay.
the other person delivers dialogue, right? I think this is one of the first movies I ever saw where people were talking over each other or repeating themselves as if the other person didn't hear them the first time, stuff like that, right? It sounded like real dialogue. And I think that the fact that this movie starts with people conversing like that, it already lulls you into like a sense of reality almost. And it really helps the case as the movie starts, like you said, amping up these moments of like what's going on and stuff and building the mystery because you really feel like this is a real thing that could be happening.
For sure, for sure.
It doesn't feel super fantastical the way that he builds this up.
I didn't recognize Francois Truffaut watching this. The whole time I was like, who's that French guy? I know that face, but I couldn't.
Who's he? Who's he from?
Oh, he's the infamous French new wave director. He's not really an actor usually. It's actually kind of funny, because he and Jean-Luc Godard are basically the two big French new wave directors. And in this podcast, he already came up, but as a critic, he is also known for initially defining the auteur theory as a critic, and only like both Jean-Luc Godard and Francois Truffaut were film critics and kind of revolutionized the way we think about film criticism at the time. And then both of them turned into directors. And later on, Francois Truffaut also turned into an actor for a while. So it's interesting that this is the second time he comes up in the podcast, but we still haven't talked about him as a director, which is the most famous thing he did.
That's so interesting. Yeah, no, I would only have recognized him from this movie, which is, really silly.
Yeah, that's fun.
I still have not seen 400 Blows. I really should.
Just to clarify that he came up when I spoke about auteur theory in the episode we did on The Killer and David Fincher.
Oh, yeah.
I directly quoted him. I also like that this isn't just happening solely in the US. The ship appears somewhere in the desert in Mongolia. The planes appear somewhere in an undefined French-speaking nation, probably somewhere in Africa, mostly remote, not directly within civilization. And we also have that scene, I think in India, where, the melody comes up the first time, where those people kind of in a spiritual gathering surround like this rock and pray to the heavens, singing or humming that melody, that 5-tone melody that comes up later on. It's kind of cool to have that. Oh, it's a worldly phenomenon, even though we're mostly gonna have this play out in the US for logistical reasons. This still felt like a bigger scale than just, oh, something's happening in the US again.
Yes, absolutely. They're talking about the song and all the people sing in India, and they say, "Where did you learn this song?" And
Hmm.
all the hands just shoot up and point up at one time. Ah, what a shudder!
Beautiful.
What a goosebump scene, you know?
Hmm.
After we kind of get through all those things, we start centering down on the family. His interactions with his family and stuff are, they're very 1970s Americana father, very shut the fuck up and eat your broccoli. Um, you know, but also in a loving way. And I really like that. I will say the one thing that I do dislike sometimes about this movie is the portrayal of the children, in that the little kids, they don't act like real little kids in any way. I think that's just kind of the era of filming, but
Hmm.
they act like weird children that are like way younger than they should be. I don't know, it makes no sense.
I do want to point out one exception there. I think the performance of the little boy that also has a close encounter of like the other family. I think that performance of that kid was amazing.
So that's one is the one who's taken is like,
Oh, that is he is taken.
that is the one that's taken?
Yeah. Here's the thing. I think he played the fascination and the stuff well. To me, he came off almost like a hypnotized kid.
Yes.
Which absolutely makes sense within the context that he had a similar experience like Roy did. And Roy is also not behaving like a normal human being. He has this obsession with this imagery and with the mountain, and the way he, as you already pointed out, the scene with the mashed potatoes and stuff like that. He is not behaving like a normal human being. So yes, I get your point, kind of, that the kid isn't behaving like a normal kid, I guess, but he felt very much to me like a kid that is just mesmerized by something otherworldly.
That's fair. When the house is like freaking out and like all the lights are happening and stuff, and the mom's like freaking out and like crying, and the kid is just laughing about it. And I was just like, in my head, I was like, no way. Like, if your kid sees you freaking out and screaming and like you're not happy, or like,
Mhm.
your kid is gonna be like, what's happening? And like is also gonna start to freak out. They're not just gonna laugh. Like, that's not how children work. Thinking about it more, that kid had an experience and was probably, like you said, like Roy, having visions or having some type of like, mental implantation of it. And it's probably way more comfortable with it for some reason.
Exactly. That's my thought, why I don't have any problems with that, because in my mind he understands that those are just the aliens contacting him or like trying to reach out, and he is already kind of okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite line when you meet the family is when they're sitting down and eating dinner. It starts the type of comedy this movie has off really well for me. He says, "Can you tell me where the cornbread is? Turkey?" And it's such a stupid joke. It's such a stupid dad joke, but it's like exactly what your grandfather here in America, that's like the kind of comedy he would have had. Do you
Hmm.
know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
it's era perfect, and it just hits like that warm soul food, comfort food feeling for some reason.
yeah.
And I really like that that's like the tone of the comedy of this film.
I like the approach, how it instantly shows like the aftermath on a small scale. So in like the family setting, his first encounter, Roy's first encounter with this, and his following obsession with this kind of splits the family apart. They are fighting. He lost his job, got the sunburn, a weird sunburn. It's all of those little small showcases of how it immediately affects the people going through this, not just like on a big scale where we see the lights go out over a big part of town or something like that, or not just on an military scale of how we see later on how the government kind of reacted to this and how they try to block off things, but even on this small scale on this personal scale of what happens to our protagonist in his immediate surroundings.
Like, the kids start trying to emulate the things he's doing, and they start talking about it, and like,
Mhm.
they start to believe it, and the wife's like, no, they're not. She's like super against it, and like, no, yeah, absolutely. The little ripples just through the family are so big, kind of like that.
There's this general idea of teaching someone deaf music through signs. That those hand symbols or like movements François Truffaut makes.
Yeah.
I think that's such a perfect metaphor for this whole experience. It's this, how do you teach someone who doesn't see the experience of looking at the color red? You can't really, but you can, you can only make metaphors and go so far. And to me, that's kind of the movie with how do you tell someone what the experience would be of meeting aliens. We can't know, we can't truly make it out to be, but we can try to visualize it. And that's really what they do with the music and the hand gestures. And that's what the movie as a whole tries to tell us of how it would be to meet those outer-worldly creatures and how that interaction could go down. I think that's just such a beautiful, small little imagery, but my God, that really, I love stuff like that.
Interesting. I would have never thought about it that deeply. I just thought of it as like, I literally thought it was like, hey, we're going to demonstrate this song that we think everybody's repeating for the people who are really fucking tone deaf. Here's some hand signals. That's literally what I took it as. That's super funny.
Yeah, that's what I meant with like, there's so many little, like that's a really artistic thing to do. That's something I would expect from more of a like an art house director to have like those kind of metaphors on a small scale that represent the bigger picture. But yeah, I kind of didn't expect something like that from Spielberg.
I have another one I want to talk about in a minute, but I think it's a little farther in. So, mashed potato scene, yeah, specifically. Okay, that actually is one moment where, for me, the kid actor was really good. Was where he's fucking with the mashed potatoes, and the kid just starts crying while watching him do it, and he's just like crying. That kid is the one kid who isn't like falling into it like the younger sibling is, and like wanting to also do the thing with the dad, and he was like helping him throw dirt in. But at that moment with the mashed potatoes, the older son is looking at him and he starts just crying. And I feel like it's that moment of that older son being like, my dad is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
My dad is broken. And that's such a wordless scene that conveys so much with that one kid's actions. I thought that was an oddly powerful scene to have in this movie, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know if I can ever eat mashed potatoes again and not think of this movie.
Oh, every time since I was a little kid. This movie's telling two major stories. We're watching the story of Roy and his family, and we're also watching the story of the military and the government essentially try to also come to the same conclusions or, figure out what's going on. I really like the bureaucracy of discovery. Like Shin Godzilla is a really good example of seeing the bureaucracy of things, right? I like the way that that's demonstrated in that film. This movie has a lot of that, of working toward like showing all the steps it takes to like get things going and get this place open, double checking if these readings from SETI or whatever are correct, and calling the dude and telling him there's readings and shit. It's just a lot going on. But my favorite thing in this movie that they do is when they need to look at a globe. I really love the scene where they have to get a globe, and it's this huge spectacle for them to go running and trying to find one, and they find it, and the guy's like, "It's a $2,500 globe," and they fucking like roll it back to their like little base area, right? And it's such a like a small thing, but it's a cool thing to see because they didn't have internet, they didn't have just the ability to like look at Google and do that. They had to literally go find a fucking globe. That's cool.
I also love how within the song, within the melody and the frequencies, there's kind of the coordinates hidden of the Devil's Tower. And that's how the military initially discovers that this is the important place. I think that's where they want to bring up the globe because they want to check, okay, what do these coordinates mean if they are coordinates?
Yeah, it's that one dude. And that's another thing too, is it's like the one guy. That one guy's like, I used to be a map maker before
Yeah,
I
and it's
did
brought up
this.
early on.
Yeah. And it's like, even if Spielberg had made this movie this year, or if somebody had made it and made it really well this year that took place now, a lot of these moments couldn't have happened that happen in this film.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like there's this general sentiment, even by Spielberg, that he couldn't make this movie like he did because there's so much optimism in this. There's so much freedom in this with the way people like Roy behave. Like he talks about, back then he didn't have kids, now he has a family, and he couldn't just make a movie about that guy just randomly leaving his family behind to to aim for his goals, to achieve whatever he set out to achieve. He isn't that optimistic of a person anymore. He doesn't know if he would make the ending in the way he did back then, and that he would have the trust in humanity to pulling it off that peacefully and stuff like that. He said a lot of things that would kind of hold him back of making the movie the way he did back then.
I mean, I don't even mean like, the changes that Spielberg's had as a person that defines how he makes the movie. I mean, like, just like the laws of being in that era, not the literal laws, but like the things that confine that era, like the lack of cell phones, the lack of internet. Take the scene where, where he's throwing the dirt in the house, right? You see all the neighbors looking out the windows and they're just kind of staring and they're just kind of watching, right? That's not how that would have gone down now. People would have been out and like filming him from 3 feet away. And like, do you know what I mean? Like police
Yeah, I
would have
know
been
what
there
you
in
mean.
10
Yeah.
minutes and like the kid disappearing and getting abducted and them just being like, the police being like, we'll figure it out. We'll find him sometime. I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's super 70s. If that would have happened now, like, they would have been like in.
Yeah, but I think like even just looking at that, you could make the argument, you could film an alien invasion movie taking place in like a parallel universe and make it a period piece at the same time, have it set in the 70s, and all of those things would still apply. But even going beyond that, that movie couldn't or wouldn't be made that way nowadays, with filmic language changing, with Steven Spielberg as a person changing, with his views changing on the world. There's so many things that are different.
The only thing I would say against that is that, again, the globe scene, I feel like, is so pedantically small to the experience of living through the 70s and probably actively living through the 70s, right? That like people now wouldn't think about that kind of thing. That's not something I think.
I can see what you mean. Yeah,
You know what I mean? It's so, but yeah, I mean that still applies to like Steven Spielberg's personal experiences and being of a person in that time as opposed to being now. He wouldn't think of that. That wouldn't cross his mind. He's not that guy anymore.
There's a beautiful moment. I think it happens when his small devil's tower that he built in the kitchen, when that collapses, there is an actual literal needle drop happening. Like the needle of the of the gramophone drops onto the LP and starts the song that starts with the line, "I like the moment you came into view." And I thought that was so amazing.
It's really funny. I like that a lot too.
I don't know if I've ever seen a literal needle drop before in film. Quite like this.
I will say, I feel like normally that would feel a little on the nose for you. So I'm surprised that you like something so unsubtle and blunt.
I think because it's just such a small moment. Like it isn't actively a major plot point or anything. It's just something happening on the side whilst other things are going on, whilst there's great visuals on screen, whilst bigger images are being built. And I don't mind if like additional things like that are thrown in, even if they are quite direct.
That makes sense. I get that. As long as it's not like, shoving the plot in your face.
Yeah, if something super obvious like that would happen and it is a major driving force of the movie, then I'm like, I don't know. But this is just like additional stuff to me. Like this was nothing that the movie quite needed to work, but they still put it in because it is a fun idea, and I don't mind that at all. There's a lot of just like beautiful filmmaking techniques here when the little boy gets abducted I think that's the first time we really see it. Those beautiful sky shots that they mostly filmed, like the cloud formations they filmed with water tanks. Do you know about any of that?
No, not at all.
Okay, so before CGI, they had to, either rely on random cloud formations forming, or what they did when they needed something very specific is that they filled up a big water tank to one half with salt water and to one half with regular water. So you don't see the difference, but there's a clear difference in weight between those two. And then you drop in white or gray colors into the tank, and they will spread throughout the tank and kind of float in between those two liquids. And that's how they got very specific shots of clouds, because you can compose those into that, and it really looks and forms a lot like clouds.
That's interesting. That's cool. That's a cool technique.
Yeah. And these are some of my favorite water tank clouds I've ever seen in film. Like there's beautiful, beautiful cloud shots in this one. I watched the making of Close Encounters of the Third Kind documentary. It's like a feature film length documentary. It's honestly not that great. I don't advise people to check it out. Just, I don't know, watch a 10 facts you didn't know about blah 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 video on YouTube. Yeah, because that's kind of how the whole documentary felt. Like it was like a handful of super interesting little trivia facts, but that's just spread out and made into a 2-hour documentary that really didn't need to be one.
Yeah, that's sorry that you had to suffer through a whole film of that then.
The imagery of Devil's Tower, like I didn't know the name of it before watching this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even connect the dots from when we see him build this thing, but I instantly recognized it once we saw it on the news. So I was wondering if it's already that recognizable to me, shouldn't that be like, as the average American getting visions of Devil's Tower, shouldn't you kind of recognize, oh, that's that mountain?
No, absolutely not. It's interesting that you would recognize it, right, or have like vision of recognizing it. And I would honestly think that that's probably just from like film osmosis. I bet you've seen it in somehow through just other film love or people posting things or something.
In my head, it was more like, okay, that's one of the iconic images or one of the most iconic imagery things in the American countryside. Like to me, it felt like a thing of a smaller scale version of the people just didn't recognize Grand Canyon when they saw Grand Canyon in their dreams, like
No,
that's how I thought about it.
Not at all, no. That's super funny though. I feel like it's been parodied in other stuff too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a good chance that I might just like recognize it from a general, films parodying or like giving flashbacks to this, so that kind of Close Encounters is directly responsible for me knowing of this imagery in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Once it is kind of revealed that it is Devil's Tower that all of those people are seeing, and we try to go there, I realized how great of an idea it is to make it all a bunch of creatives, really. Like outside of Roy, who is kind of an exception to this and just a regular dude, most of the people attempting that journey are some sort of artists. And it makes so much sense to me because, the average person having kind of, I don't know, a creative vision or some inspiration or anything, they wouldn't do much with that. They would like maybe think about it for a day and then kind of forget about it. But obviously creatives who are constantly working through their inner workings, through their art, it makes a lot of sense that, a bunch of painters would start painting the mountain and try to figure out, okay, why am I seeing the mountain all the time? They would kind of try to get behind that more than probably the average dude. So that was a lot of fun.
Are you saying that because so many of the people like were creating images of the mountain?
Yeah. To me, it felt like more the creative
That's interesting.
audience. That I assume that way more people saw kind of similar images in their mind, in their dreams or whatever. But the people we get, I felt like were more kind of the artists who actually tried to work through those images as if it's inspiration or something.
See, that's interesting because I have always taken it like a metaphor for inspiration itself, in that like these people weren't all creatives, and that this drive to make this thing in their head be real is so strong that they are compelled to be they're compelled to make those paintings. Like it takes him a while to get to sculpting. Like he doesn't just go, oh, I should sculpt this because I'm artistic.
Yeah.
Like, and he struggles with getting it right. So like, and like having it right, and she has a shit ton of drawings of it that she doesn't get it right. She doesn't get it right. She doesn't have it right. So I feel like that's them, actually her not being a great painter. That's her like gaining the skill as she's attempting to like claw this image out of her head.
Mm.
So I actually saw it as more like them being compelled to do it despite not being creative, actually.
Interesting.
Something that I think is really interesting about this movie is that the score was made before the film was like set up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to go about a movie that already has so much to do with music in such a small way. Like it's obviously not a music film, you know what I mean? But in its core, music is important. So I think that was really interesting that they did it backwards. Um, and a little tidbit I think is kind of fun before we get to like the real end of this movie is that when the Indian crowd is shouting, they are shouting Aya Re Aya, which means he has come.
That's cool. About the 5-tone melody, actually, John Williams recalled in the documentary that he came up with like 300 versions of 5-tone melodies of potential candidates. And Spielberg initially rejected all 300 of them. Which
That's so funny.
which kind of drove John Williams mad, and he like said, "Yeah, that what do you want from me? There's not that many more combinations left," which kind of drove Spielberg mad, who called up a mathematician to calculate him the amount of combinations possible with the 12 scale notes and 5 notes. He came up with the number of around 130,000 combinations. So John Williams got back at it, but eventually they ended up at one of the 300 original melodies that John Williams like marked because he liked it, and that was the final one. But yeah, there was that brief fight about how many options there are, and yeah, a mathematician quite shutting up John Williams really quick.
It's really funny. Something I just kind of saw that I've just discovered whilst doing all of this really deep, in-depth research that we do sometimes right on the fly. We were talking about Mishima, right, earlier?
Yeah.
In Life in 4 Chapters, right? Paul Schrader is the person who wrote this film. Steven Spielberg changed a bunch of the script, and Paul Schrader was so mad about the changes he made that he told Steven Spielberg to remove his name from the credits. So when he removed it, there was no writing or no credit for a writer. Spielberg was like, I'll put myself there instead.
That's interesting.
Despite not actually writing the film.
I heard kind of the similar story, but from the perspective I read about it, it came off more like Steven Spielberg rewrote it so much that Paul Schrader, hated it. But like looking at it from that perspective, it seems kind of legit to then put Steven Spielberg's name on it, since his vision is clearly the thing being put to paper at the end of the day. Like that's how I read it.
It is. And it's such a weird thing to have this idea that you say, like, you have a script written and somebody just goes, oh man, this would be better if I changed these 18 things. And that's enough for it to be like, now it's my idea. Like, that's.
I don't think, like, in both of those versions of the story, Paul Schrader is clearly the one who didn't want his name attached to it. You know, it's
Of
not like
course, of
Spielberg took
course.
it away from him. Paul Schrader didn't want anything to do with it.
It's just a weird, weird thing. It makes me wonder what Paul Schrader's version would have been like. Like, is it darker? You know, is it really dark?
Who knows?
I don't know. Yeah, who knows? Who knows what it would have been? We get to the end, which is incredibly kind of long. It's actually probably the one part of the movie I think is a little too drawn out.
Oh, do you think so? I love the ending. Like, it's amazing.
For a first time, no, it's great. It's suspenseful. The English word awesome comes from something being awe-inspiring, you know,
For
something
sure,
that
yeah.
makes you feel awe. And this does that well, you know?
Mhm.
But yeah, no, that whole sequence is really, really fantastic. The end. I think there's an alternate ending. Do you know anything about that?
Like, he wanted a few more months till the release of this movie. And I think this was also Paramount. Paramount was in a dire situation at the time, and they kind of depended on this movie releasing for the Christmas market. So they didn't want to give him the extra time. Later on, due to it being a success, he kind of got to right to do the kind of Zack Snyder thing of going back, shooting a few more little snippets, and then re-editing a bit of it. But Paramount like insisted on something weird of like, okay, but we want you to show the inside of the spaceship so we can market it with that.
That's right.
Which Spielberg didn't want to do, but he kind of agreed to it. And then there's a final cut version that he got to do years later on, where he just, I think, cut out the inside of the spaceship part that he didn't want to do, but it's like the directorial cut, the second version. I think I watched the final cut version of it actually, so I don't know what exact scenes it was that were missing originally in the theatrical cut.
I think I do remember now being inside the ship. I don't think I mind it. I don't think it was that bad of a scene. I mean, I get why it doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, like I don't think it was badly shot or anything. He just hates the concept of we get to see it. He wanted it to be this mysterious thing that we don't fully get to experience.
Yeah.
I have a few more little anecdotes from a visual effects side. This was the first time in the history of cinema that the camera movements were recorded, and so that they could replicate them on another scale with models and have actual camera movement that lines up for both the actual scale real life sets and the miniatures being put into it. Something that Star Wars then also did a lot. So I think it was the same team, so early ILM team that did that, but this was the first time they really tried that. My favorite anecdote was of the set designer of Encounters. He was a big, big fan of Francois Truffaut's work, and he thought, yeah, I just, for this movie, they built the landing site, the biggest set anyone has ever built for a movie. And he was super proud of that, and he was waiting for Francois Truffaut's reaction to his work, and he was so nervous to see him react to it, and he kind of had no reaction to it at all. And once they built, like, there's this small scene in a motel, and he just, like, in an afternoon kind of, prepared that set of the motel, and Francois Truffaut enters it, and his immediate reaction was, now this is a movie set. Because it reminded him of the small-scale filmmaking that he did in France. So that was his payoff to Francois Truffaut reacting to his set just in a very different way than he expected.
A fun fact about Truffaut was that he didn't really speak a lot of English when he did this movie. But apparently, when at one point he delivers the line, "They belong here more than we," right? And many of the crew members thought he said, "They belong here, Mozambique,"
Yeah.
and they had T-shirts made with that on it, and he thought that was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, lovely trivia.
What a great movie! I'm really happy you finally got to see it. It's one of the reasons I think that of the big directors out there, the really big guys, the big heavy hitters, Spielberg will always be my favorite, and not because of Raiders of the Lost Ark or anything like that, but it's mainly this movie right here.
Mhm.
So I guess going from First Contact, we can move on to our second film, which is Post Contact.
Yeah, District 9 was written and directed by Neil Blomkamp and released in 2009. After a mockumentary-style recap of the First Contact, the movie mostly plays several years later. The aliens live in a secluded slum at this point, and there is a lot of tension between species. We experience the story out of the perspective of Vicus, a semi-competent general that seems to only be in his position due to nepotism. His mission to evict the aliens from District 9 goes wrong when he comes into contact with some mysterious goo that threatens to turn him into one of them. He quickly goes from being the hunter to being hunted and has to team up with the aliens he despised so much in the beginning. So, Devyn, this is another one of your absolute favorites.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Oh man, there's a lot of narrative themes happening in this film. It's got a lot of depth about what it's trying to say. It has some of the most interesting aliens designs I've seen in a long time. I think the world building is really fantastic in this movie. It really seamlessly moves from mockumentary to just normal film. I think happens really well, and that's not something you see very often. Usually, you need some kind of explanation as to why the movie does that. This movie doesn't really care. You just start watching the movie as a movie after a while, but it somehow works.
Yeah.
And it all started as a failed Halo project. They made a bunch of props for a Halo movie that got shelved, and they had a bunch of weapons and all kinds of things for this Halo movie they were going to make, and mech suits and things like that. And they were like, what are we going to do? They'd filmed this thing called Alive in Johannesburg, I think is what it's called. And it was a short film that Blomkamp did about the arrival of the ship. And he was like, well, I'd really love to, go on that and expand that. And so, they paired the idea with these weapons they had from this Halo movie. But yeah, I love this movie so much. There's so much happening. But this was your first seeing of this. This was a pretty lauded movie. So what did you think?
Yeah, I didn't love this nearly as much as Close Encounters. I gotta admit up front. I think it has a lot of great sides to it. Some even like fantastic. As you already pointed out, the world building is really well done. It's super efficient, and it has to be, because the story kind of starts several years into this situation. There's a lot of politics going on. There's a lot of explanations that need to be, pushed out of the way, getting past at really quickly, and it does it super well. The amount of information this movie delivers in a short time is insane. I think the props are beautiful. The alien design is great. It's insane how they made this movie with only $30 million budget. It makes sense that you pointed out the Halo connection. That explains some of where the costs got diminished, because they already had a lot of the props. That's kind of a twist to me, because I was aware that Neil Blomkamp was attached to an ever on and off being pushed away project to make a Halo movie. That comes up like in the news every few years. Oh, is the Halo movie with Neil Blomkamp happening finally? I wasn't aware that it's dating back all the way to District 9 or pre-District 9. That's insane. Yeah, so that's fun that at least something exists that used the work that already went into that. Like, my major issue with this is the way it's, like, one of the major themes of this movie, and it's very direct about this, is the idea of working through racism using the aliens as an example. The protagonist is very much a cogwheel in a political party. There's very obvious racism even in the way they talk about them, the insect metaphors and stuff like that. Like that very much rings true to
the prawns, using the term prawns.
The prawns, yeah, exactly. exactly the word prawns that very much rings true to the way, you know, during World War II people spoke about Jews and stuff like that. I think that kind of falls apart with the mafia side of things in the story. Like that's I can't believe the route they went down with that part of the story. And in my mind, that absolutely works against the main themes and the main lessons they wanna talk about here.
With the Haitians? Not Haitians, Nigerians.
Yeah.
Okay.
All of that wouldn't be a problem to me if, you know, this movie takes place in South Africa, if it was just nameless, the mafia took over that and there's criminal, you know, things going on and they exploit the aliens. Because from a logistical world building side of things, all of that makes sense. It makes sense that they would abuse their will for cat food or whatever it is. It makes sense that they would want the weapons just to flex or stuff like that. All of that is very logical. I think just straight up being like, yeah, the Nigerians took over there is so blatantly unreasonably racist for no reason. It adds nothing to it. That it's just like, what the fuck? You don't have any reason to make it Nigerians. Just make it no name, the mafia took over. End of story.
I don't know South African politics, you know. I don't know African politics at all whatsoever. Clearly this movie's, you know, farther than just more it just being about racism. It's specifically about the apartheid, right? That's specifically what this movie is mirroring or trying to talk about. So the Nigerians thing, though, is an interesting point because I don't know if you know this, but this film is actually banned in Nigeria because of that.
I followed up on it because I had that odd feeling and I was like, I need to know more about this side of the story.
But so farther than that, and this has to be intentional, which makes me wonder, okay, I don't know, okay, it has to be intentional, but the name of the leader of that crew in the movie, like the big bad guy that sits on the throne, right? His name is the exact same as whatever, not the current or the one before, but two before leader of Nigeria. It's the same name. And it's clearly a statement in some way about Nigeria by a South African person. Now, I don't know if that is a bad statement to be making. I don't know what it means exactly. It clearly hit a note with the Nigerian government and the Nigerian people. But I don't think that it was done just because. I think there's clearly a reason. I don't know if it's a good reason. I'm not gonna back and condone his reasoning or anything like that. But there's clearly it was very meditated to make it Nigerians.
And that's to me like the super odd part. Obviously, I'm lacking context. Obviously, I'm lacking cultural knowledge regarding all of that. But the fact as to how Nigeria, as like from a politics side and stuff like that, reacted to it, and just from looking at how they behave, what they do in the movie, Nigerians really come off as the worst in this. Yeah, it seems intentional and it seems awful to like put such an intentional kind of negative message towards a country, a whole nation in a movie that is supposed to, it's like the major takeaway of the movie is against apartheid, against racism. And my God, what the fuck were you even thinking? I'm so put off by that. Like that's my main problem with the movie, and it really it brought it down a lot.
That's really fair, and it's something I noticed more with this time of watching it. When they first mentioned the Nigerians, I was like, oh, wow, they called them out as all just Nigerians. And but the thing is that I've seen this movie many times. Until this time of actually focusing on what they're saying with that and then looking up later and seeing it, right? And having the dots connect, right? That has never stuck with me that they were Nigerians, ever. That's not been like a lasting thing in my head. I've just been, it's when the gangs moved in, like you said, right? It's just when like the gangs
make
moved
it
in.
a nameless gang and I wouldn't have any problem with it. It's just,
So for me, like it's not been a big ding on its score for me, because it's something that I've always thought of as inconsequential. I never just picked up on that, I guess. I was oblivious. I was too, focused on aliens shit. But I totally see why it's not a great thing. But again, it could be a good statement to make. I don't know. Not every leader is a
I
good
doubt it.
person. Well, I don't know. Maybe he's making a
Yeah.
dig at a specific leader that was not a good leader, that maybe was part of the apartheid. I don't know.
I tried to look up like a defensive side of that. I tried to, if there's something, and I found an essay by an Nigerian living in America and like kind of in film studies or something. My issue with that is that his defense didn't show me some context as to why they would have done it, why it would make sense. His major defense for it was mainly, oh, the white dudes are like even worse. Clearly it's about against capitalism. Clearly it's against all of that. And I agree, the white dudes don't come off as great people in this movie. And clearly it's mostly about systematic problems, about systematic issues and systematic racism. However, that in just no way in that essay did it ever justify as to why it needed to be Nigerians, which is my major issue with this.
Specifically Nigerians.
Yeah, so to me it just felt like that one essay that really defended that thing was more like, yeah, I don't care as a Nigerian, and not like, yeah, it makes sense. The more I looked into it, the less I could find any justification. So that's my major what the fuck with this movie.
The only way I could justify it in my head would be that logistically you have characters on screen that are all speaking a foreign language together to give this idea that they're not part of everybody else, right? In this gang, they're like more secular, right? That means you have to choose a language that they'd all be speaking, right? So you have to choose a people that they come from. So I guess like that could maybe make sense why you would logistically want to do that, but
maybe
that's about it.
I don't know. That's such a minor rewrite,
right?
in my opinion.
Exactly.
I don't know.
But aside of that, there's a lot of fucking good movie here, okay? Because I fucking love this movie still. I don't give a shit. The racism asides and stuff, just the entire premise of this idea that a spaceship has been here and it was just hanging out forever until we get in and they're all fucking sick and stuff. And like, it's such a unique idea for a film. And I don't think I've seen like a good alien contact movie that has flipped it like this since, honestly.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. The moment we enter the alien ship, in no way would I have expected that to be the outcome. Like, I expected an attack, I expected maybe it being empty or something, but just having a whole culture in there of people starving because they've been here for so long and they're stuck. That was absolutely not what I saw coming. Yeah.
Just the entire way that the aliens look and behave is really interesting. I'm going to ask you a question. How do you feel about this movie without having any real reason, just stylistic choice, moving from documentary to traditional film?
I'm cool with that. Didn't mind. It was like a little bit jarring in the first moments, maybe. In the initial sequence, it seems like this is all gonna be a mockumentary. It is all gonna be presented in that way. And when the first shots come up where it doesn't stick to that and it's a more traditional filmic language, I was taken aback by it. For maybe like 2 minutes, I was kind of, what's going on? This is inconsistent, but yeah, it committed so hard to that then that I kind of accepted it as a vehicle just for, giving us exposition in a not too classical, straightforward, some character telling another character way. I do, however, have to say, I think a lot of times when it goes back to the mockumentary style and when it goes back to talking heads kind of telling the camera what's going on, I thought there were quite a few where it was unnecessary. Like, I even wrote down one line. I think it wasn't even a documentary thing, but more two characters talking to each other. He was the only human being who had ever combined with DNA and survived, but his real value is that he could operate alien weapons. And that happens like 10 minutes after we find out all of those things, after we've seen all of those things. It literally showed us and then later told us about us. That was such an unnecessary line. It was kind of ridiculous.
It really like thinks that you as the viewer don't really grasp the idea of genetically locked weaponry. They do it like 3 times or something. Like they do it once normally, and then they do it again when he like finds one of the weapons. He's like, "It's okay, man. Humans can't use it anyway," or whatever. Like he doesn't, he doesn't mess. Then another time, talking about how the Nigerians are like eating the body parts so that they can control it because they can't.
Yeah.
And then like, they totally absolutely shove it down your throat that like, hey, did you know that they can't control the weapons or whatever, right? My thing to that is that I've watched movies with people who literally would have been like, hey, why don't they just use the weapon?
Well.
So maybe sometimes, to get a point across, maybe it was needed.
Yeah, I guess that's just the difference in what I'm looking for in movies. And I absolutely hate being spoon-fed like that.
No, I know what you mean. Like you said, give you a lot of information kind of all at once in the beginning there. I'm not mad. I don't feel like they're trying to spoon feed it as much as they are trying to just like, hey, this is the main plot of the movie. We just want to double check that out of all these like things we just fucking quickly explained to you, this is the important one you caught.
Yeah, to me, it kind of just works again against the things they did earlier, because the way they initially pulled it off, I was complimenting the setup and how efficient they were with delivering information that is clearly needed. And then to later go around and, do the exact opposite of delivering information that isn't needed in not that great of a way. It's like almost as if 2 different people made those scenes,
That's fair too, yeah.
But there are a lot of things I like a lot in this movie. After Wikus escapes the testing chambers and is on the run, we see those news flash things with an instant smear campaign against him. The photoshopped images of him having fucking the aliens and instantly discrediting him. He can't use any payment methods or anything. His fiance doesn't believe him. He's completely cut off.
He's most hated number 1 at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny because it's such a good tactic to distract from the mistakes they're making with the way they're treating the aliens, is to create this enemy out of him. Kind of government twist.
There's some great body horror aspects to this. I love how they kind of do the Fly transformation, but in a very different context, with his arm slowly growing into that. Man, I wish I would talk more positively, but it instantly brings me to a negative side again.
That's fine, dude. What is it?
All of those things individually I love. I think they kind of were almost too ambitious with this movie, with all of the ideas they want to bring into it, because the aspect alone of the body horror, him transforming, is cool. And it's well done with the different props and the different stages of his makeup design and stuff like that. However, within the plot of how the story progresses, it feels like the first part of his transition went super quick. It accelerated really quickly because we had to get to the point in the story where he is in the lab and he is being tested on. But then it almost stops the transformation for a super long time, because now we have a lot of runtime where we need to focus on the action sequence, on him running away. We need to establish a lot of new things. We need to establish his relationship to the alien that he teams up with. We need to understand how that all worked, what that fluid was, that it was actually the gas they need to leave, etc. And because of that, his transformation almost can't continue for like half of the movie, and he's in this locked state of this is how far I transformed up until it needs to be a pressing issue again because we need the story to progress. It's like it's trying too many different things and can't fully execute on all of the parts like the body horror because we need to make other things first.
Are you saying like he didn't emotionally focus on it enough, or do you mean like the visuals of the change seem to stop entirely?
Yeah, like on the visual side, his change happened super rapidly in the beginning and then kind of just stopped and plateaued for a while because the story needed to happen and because action sequences needed to happen, and we can't change him too much for now because he still needs to be a functioning action hero at the moment. And only then we return to, oh, okay, and his body is still changing.
So I kind of took that, I guess, as like it's going up his arm, right?
Mm-hmm.
At one point, he opens his shirt later on, and it's like really far spread across his chest.
Yeah, but super lightly.
Well, that's you kind of. I feel like it's spreading across his chest and back takes longer. We're not seeing a lot of that because it's going up in his shoulder where we can't see it when his shirt is on. And I imagine that changing whatever his internal organs at the same time is a lot more complex than like changing an arm.
Mm.
But like I never really thought about it, I guess, like that. I just thought of it as the change, you know? We've talked about it before. I really love when movies throw so many things at the wall and see, you know, how many things will stick. I like that. And this movie does do a lot of that, you know, because you have the racism, you have the change, you have the relationship, the alien and his kid, which is really interesting. And there's so many questions to be asked about why that alien and his kid are so much more intelligent than all of the other ones, right?
Mm.
It makes you wonder about their like they talk about maybe them have a caste system or they're the workers and something like. There's theories that like the alien that we follow, Christopher, I think his name is,
Mm-hmm.
that he's like the pilot of the ship.
I would assume something like that.
Yeah, or he's the captain or something like that.
I have more complaints if you want.
Please do. Yeah, give me your complaints.
I kind of hate that at a certain point they need to resort to Wickers just being stupid so the military can have the one up again. He gets away. He flees to District 9. And at that point, he kind of has the upper hand. He found a way where he can still live on and try to find a solution without being bothered by the military. Then he calls his fiancée, and a few minutes later, we see a bunch of choppers arriving at District 9. And for me, as a viewer, it instantly was obvious, okay, you know, obviously they tracked the phone call. Obviously, due to the phone call, they arrived at District 9 and got there. And as a viewer, I assumed that's also what Wickers took away from that situation. There was a clear connection. But like 10 minutes later, he just apparently forgot about that and just calls up the wife again and has like a long talk with her, leading the military directly to him. Like he had no... Apparently he didn't make that connection. I don't know. It's just there's no explanation, but Wickers was stupid. and
you know, okay, here's the thing, right? He thinks that she's not trying to do that. He, in his mind, why would she be selling him out, right?
Yeah, maybe because she's the daughter of the company.
Well, we see that later. We see that later that she is, you know, kind of under her dad's push, doing, you know, because she misses him and stuff and etc. and whatnot. But like, dude is going through insane changes, literally almost being killed. His world is turned upside down. His wife is like his only person really. I don't know. I don't think that that's that big of a stretch to make that mistake to call her again. People do stupid shit like that all the time under duress. Like, of course, to the viewer, we're like, why would you do that? That seems stupid. But, you know, if you were in that moment, you're not thinking straight. Hell no.
I don't know. It was such a calm moment, too. Like, it was really the moment where he could finally, like, breathe for a second and, you know, relax, and that's when he decided, it's a great time to call her. Oh man, I get that from a character perspective. This works from like just an emotional side of why he would want that, why he would make that call. That makes sense. But there's like to every decision, there's several aspects as to how it affects the movie on like a character dynamic side, on a character arc side, on the emotional side, on the plot side, and just on the straight up plot side, this absolutely falls apart to me. Like it just doesn't add up.
I guess before I forget, then I'll just throw in there that one moment that always bothered me about this movie is the sentimental moment of, it is the end. We'll bounce back, but the wife talking about that she just found the like flower sculpture, whatever, there one day, and then we see that he like still makes them as an alien. How the fuck do you get it there?
Yeah.
What? What? No, shut up. Nuh-uh. He could barely get around as normal Vicus. You think he's gonna get around as like fucking Vicus McPrawn face? No, that's not happening.
Vicus
No,
McPrawn
what?
face.
It's out of this world. That doesn't make any sense. I like the cat food thing is really fun in this movie.
To me, again, it's a fun idea looking at it individually and not putting it into a bigger context. But if you put it into a bigger context or try to, then it almost seems to me like a moment where the movie doesn't quite take the aliens serious enough to get to the point of this movie is about racism. It kind of shows them, like puts them on one pedestal with animals, with a lower species. It kind of justifies the political, discrepancy between those two. It kind of tells us that they aren't quite like humans. They aren't like us. They are.
Well, I mean, so yes, right? If you look at things as a pure black and white one-to-one representation of things. But the thing is we're still telling a story about aliens. We are telling a story about creatures who aren't like us.
Yeah, that's kind of just a bigger problem of the thing as to why I don't fully think all of those ideas mesh. It kind of it wants it both ways. It wants to be a funny movie about aliens, and it also wants to be this big statement about racism. It doesn't always mesh.
Yeah, I see what you're saying a little bit. I think I like when you have that contrast, that juxtaposition. I like that kind of stuff. But I think that kind of funny, that when we say like the cat food thing is funny, isn't like the ha 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 what a joke kind of funny.
I didn't mean it like
it's
that.
Not that, yeah. But it's the kind of funny that works in this way to me because it's just an interesting, like, that's a quirk of the aliens. Humans have fucking quirks too, I don't know. I like that. It brings a realism to this. If it was so serious and dour and just I don't know, it wouldn't feel as real in a way.
Like, again, you could have kind of made the same thing and just make them, I don't know, addicted to something super specific and weird, but not make it cat food. I don't know, make it sushi.
Let me look at that. Yeah, sorry.
I don't know. You could make it an actual human food and not put them down a pedestal and just make them addicted to something very specific. Yeah, I feel like you could make a lot of those points and achieve a lot of their goals without working against the other themes and the other things they are also trying to achieve. And a lot of times I don't think it quite has the oversight or the overview to follow through on all of the ideas, and they are just great if you look at them individually, but you can't really put all of the pieces into one bigger picture here.
The co-writer of the movie grew up fishing for prawns in real life, and it's part of the inspiration of the design of the character. When you fish for prawns, it is common to use cat food because prawns love cat food.
So in a way, like if you overanalyze that, again, it's kind of what I said. It's almost a justification for the racist behavior of the white dudes.
No, exactly. Okay, but no, okay, I have a reason for that. Okay, because again, you want even further for that. Prawns are bottom feeders. They're literally considered like the dredge of that ecosystem, right? You are seeing this from the perspective, right, of the bad guys,
Hmm.
of MUN, of the humans. Humans are the bad guys here, right? We're
Yeah.
the people that want them gone or want them like this. We're calling them prawns, right? So we see these things that they eat the cat food. We see all the bad things about them, right? That's, I think, on us more than it is on anything else. Like that.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I know what the movie is going for there. But again, having them actually be addicted to cat food and that, you could make that up as like an urban myth, similar to how in Jojo Rabbit, how the kid tries to, talk about, oh yeah, and they eat that, and they are monsters, and they don't sleep or whatever. All of those legends and all of those, the thing of where do we live in your head. It's not true. All of those racist ideas are just not true. That's a great point to be made there. Here, I feel like the fact that they are calling them prawns should be the same of like, oh, look how disgusting they talk about those others, about the aliens. And then the film goes around and makes them actually addicted to cat food as if they were actually prawns, as if the racists actually had a point all along. It kind of works against it. That's my problem with it. It doesn't really think of the bigger picture as to how things come off if they, make certain decisions. The decision of calling them prawns and also having the connection to cat food makes sense just on its own. But again, if you look at it from a bigger picture of what the movie is trying to do, it works against it. It constantly counteracts its own messaging, in my opinion.
I don't think of it as to me those two things they're not layered in the same message. That's just part of like the creative process of creating the alien, of making it a prawn or whatever, and like they make it be this bottom feeder type thing because they want you to understand that that's the way that people perceive them. And it's really hard to create a fictional creature and create fictional stereotypes around it and then not display those stereotypes in some type of way. Would be really hard to like accentuate why people hate these things, I guess. The truth is that they're addicted to cat food. Humans are addicted to crystal meth. Can the aliens smoke crystal meth and not get addicted? I don't know. But my point is that humans are addicted to things too. We are shown the aliens in the darkest light, but we're also shown them in a really good way by the end. And that's the whole point, is the guy comes around and walks the mile in their shoes. And it's to say that maybe those things that we see as bad, like something like their faces, right? They call them prawns because of the way their faces look. But by the end of it, you can read Christopher's emotions through everything his face is doing.
For
It's
sure,
not a
yeah.
prawn face anymore. It's just a face. You just see it as a face. You're going through that journey. Maybe those things that we see as negative, that they really aren't negative. We are just putting the negative connotation on the thing that the alien actually already is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, to me, that just doesn't fully work because at the end of the day, someone made that creative decision. And in our world where we look at this movie through our worldly lens, that is a negative connotation at the end of the day. And that is actively working against the theme.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can see how you can, watch those and not ask those questions. I know that I'm very much looking for connections within those things, but that's, as I already said within that sentence, that's what I am looking for in movies. Like we talked about this before of, yeah, this is a movie that tries a lot of things. And yeah, I do love some movies that try a lot of things, but I want all of those things to work together. I think it succeeds when all of those things work like puzzle pieces, and at the end of the film, you have a big picture to look at, and it all kind of fell into place. And here, I just think they kind of lay next to each other and don't do that.
I don't know how many other the Blomkamp movies you've seen.
I've seen Chappie as a kid, but not really. Like,
I can't believe that's a sentence that was just said to me out loud. I saw Chappie as a kid.
or like as a teen. Yeah, kid won't add up. But yeah, when did Chappie release? 2015. Oh yeah, I was
The the
17 years
the
old. Yeah.
it released 2015, is what you said?
Yeah.
It released the year I had my first kid. To put that in perspective of
Yeah.
our age difference for people who don't know us better. That's kind of the Blomkamp thing, I think. I don't know, it clearly for you probably doesn't work.
Mhm.
For me, I kind of like that kind of stuff where you have this juxtaposition of having something serious and kind of being a little sillier with it. Um, I like that a lot, a lot in most movies. That's like probably my favorite thing you can do is take a serious subject and be silly, or the opposite, honestly, take a silly subject
And
and
be
be
super
serious about
serious.
that
Hmm.
about that silly subject. Those are like my favorite thing you can do in film. And that's kind of the Blomkamp balance that he has maybe a struggle with things like Chappie. And this Elysium is another one like that,
Mm.
where he's trying to tell a story that's not silly, but it's balancing thoughtful and meaningful, right? With just cool
Mhm.
and just trying to be a cool thing. And that's hard. And I think, he's also probably, had some problematic issues that haven't worked well for him.
Mhm.
Obviously, Chappie being, working with Diane Edward is probably a huge regret now. I wish there was a District 10.
Mhm.
I would love a sequel to this movie.
I wish Neil Blomkamp had a fantastic script supervisor that he fully trusted and was like, okay, is there anything that counteracts each other in this? And what do you think should we do about it? Then it would probably result in something fantastic. Because yeah, he absolutely has some qualities that are fantastic. Like he obviously has a fantastic understanding of visual effects and how to implement them cost effectively. Something like nowadays, I'm thinking of Gareth Edwards in a similar way, where I don't think he is the strongest writer, but he clearly has an amazing understanding of visual effects and how to implement them. Otherwise, his movie last year, what was it called? The Creator. His movie, The Creator, last year is kind of a similar situation where, with a medium budget, they were able to pull off incredible visual effects because someone was behind the whole project that clearly understood the process, that clearly understood how they could cut corners without losing any quality. And yeah, that's kind of how I think about Neil Blomkamp, where he clearly has a lot of understanding of a lot of technical sides of filmmaking, a lot of understanding of how to implement and work together of the various departments. I just wish he also had a better overview of how to work together the different story aspects of his movies.
I do really appreciate, I like to see cinema from around the world, but I love to see the representation from specific places that we don't see a lot. I like to see the stretching of the wings of genre. A lot of times in movie cultures that don't produce a lot of films or internationally, we don't see a lot of genre films from them. We
Yeah,
don't see a
for
lot of
sure.
sci-fis or horrors or things like that from those places. But for there to be a director out there that right now that's like trying to tell these really interesting, at least from a creative aspect, sci-fi stories with that tonality that is so specifically South African. He's making sure that the films are in South Africa. He's using South African actors. He's unabashedly having characters speak Afrikaans and use complete South African slang and
Mhm.
just putting that on the world stage is, even with all its flaws, something I really hope we get to keep seeing.
Yeah. I came off as super harsh during this episode, probably regarding District 9. But yeah, there's obviously a lot of fantastic craft here. And I still hope that we will get more by Neil Blomkamp and maybe more of quality. Because I know some of his stuff has had mixed reception. Some of his
It's
more
all
recent
been, yeah,
work.
mixed, yeah. One I think I wonder, I didn't look into it all, but I wonder if the ship kind of looks a little bit like the ship from Close Encounters.
Oh yeah, just turned on its head.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah, true.
I wonder if there's a little bit of a
Of a reference.
feelings
Yeah,
behind
it
it.
almost gotta be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah,
realize
probably.
before, but yeah, for sure. Just looking at it on a picture right now, that's definitely it.
That's funny.
In our next appointment, we are gonna discuss 2 films relating to refugees fleeing to Europe. First, the 2023 released Italian Academy Award candidate Io Capitano. It follows 2 Senegalese teenagers on their way from West Africa to Europe, which involves the crossing of both the Sahara Desert and the Mediterranean Sea.
The second film on your prescription is Flee. The 2021 Danish film is an animated documentary relying on real footage that, in a very artistic way, through cell animation, creates anonymity for the protagonist while resulting in a unique experience. It tells the story of how Amin fled from Afghanistan to Denmark and all of his struggles relating to that.
If you don't want to get spoiled for either of these, make sure to check them out by the next episode 2 weeks from now.
I'm Devyn,
I'm George.
and this was your Medicinema.